Now at the end, I can be myself, neither blindly optimistic nor utterly fatalistic. Here, in this place between possibilities, the space between the heavens of the gods and the flames of hell, we can wander together through the bardo realms, searching for a vehicle fit for our rebirth. We are being born, whether into heaven or hell, I cannot say. If this be the transhuman annunciation, we have not escaped the birth canal, nor uttered the birth cry. Yet, like human birth, the transhuman is inevitable. There is no going back, no reversal of history into the archaic, and no place to hide. In the twinkling of an eye, we will all be changed. Therein lies the terror of our situation, a terror so encompassing we have done everything, both as individuals and as a civilization, to ignore it, like an infant believing that which cannot be seen will not be. We've cut ourselves off from the glory and the horror of the world, ignoring the incredible cornucopia of discovery, that promise of the near future, and shield our eyes from the specter of the gun held forth in a child's hand, spraying out hatred at the speed of sound. Haunted by hungry ghosts, we forget that in the bardo, the wrathful demons chase us because they love us, because we are attached to what they represent. To move forward, we must remove our blinders, think the unthinkable, endure the unendurable. It's an essential requirement for our continued survival. We must trade the careful architecture of culture, which keeps us safe and warm, for a more exposed position. The night might be dark and cold, but at least we can look up and see the stars and any approaching asteroids. This, I believe, has been the great promise of entheogens. They open our eyes to the reality of the human condition. The psychedelic experience is an intuition of the transhuman state. They allow us, even for a few brief moments, to see beyond ourselves, to enter the transhuman. But we are imperfect. We can enter, and we always exit. We have not learned to stop the wheel of time or the cycle of karma and enter nirvana. Nor do we often return from our highs with bliss-bestowing hands like a bodhisattva. Instead, we end up back in Maya, or worse, with attachments to the blissful state, the chemical paradise, which becomes its own hell. We become addicted to the lie of perpetual rising, the perfect high, the repeated solve et coagula of the soul. I can discern two exit points from the human condition, which would allow us to safely pass into the transhuman. Both are technological. For technology is the expression of human will in the material world, and it is only through technology we can make our will perfect, attaining the transhuman. But these technologies differ as night from day. The first technology is ancient as the word itself, for its origins lie in the beginnings of human language. Once we moved into the epigenetic space of speech, it became possible to manipulate human beings through the transmission of ideas. In the same moment we discovered the ineffable, that which cannot be spoken. Yet even the unspoken can be experienced directly. A Gnostic communion with the forces beyond our ken. And experience within the ineffable, even if it cannot be spoken to directly, forces an evolution of language, a linguistic interpretation of things which cannot be pronounced. For most humans, this is an unpleasant experience, perhaps because it is profoundly asocial. Language is what binds us together, and any experience which reshapes our linguistic nature separates us from our companions, forcing those who seek that experience into isolation. In the communities of the Paleolithic, archaeologists often find a single dwelling isolated from the others at the boundary between the community and the wilds of the world beyond. This is where we find the shaman, the original technologist. Even today, those cultures which have practicing shamans keep them far away from the day-to-day communities. Shamans are weird, scary, reminders of the existential terror of the ineffable, mad with God shatter, the psychological condition of ego fragmentation caused by repeated exposure to the unadulterated numinous. But if madness is the occupational disease of shamans, consider their function. They take in the raw energies of the transhuman current and step them down so that the common people can retain their connection to that which is beyond them. Shamans stand between the worlds. Like a Gnostic Janus, a shaman has one face turned toward the transhuman, while another looks upon humanity. The transhuman remains within the domain of the ineffable, even to we who are on the verge of it. If we could utter the word, we would be transhuman. Instead, we take our trips and marvel at all we see, then come back and draw or dance or make movies, trying to use all the wordless worlds of communication to return to the transhuman current and take our brothers and sisters with us. Yet as in the parable of the elephant and the blind man, we do not recognize that everything we encounter in the psychedelic experience is just one place, one mode of being, an infinitely faceted hyper-reality. But the shaman is not confused by this, nor can he be seduced by one version of the ineffable, believes in nothing he sees, or rather believes it all, without judgment, without attachment, without expectation. Thus the shaman cannot be overwhelmed, or surprised, or disappointed. He has thoroughly surrendered himself. And for as long as he can maintain his presence without lust of result, the shaman becomes a vehicle for transhumanity. In the typically perceptive words of Terence McKenna, a shaman is someone who has been to the end. It's someone who knows how the world really works, and knowing how the world really works means to have risen outside, above, and beyond the dimensions of ordinary space-time and casuistry, and actually seen the wiring under the board, stepped outside the confines of learned culture and learned and embedded language into the domain of what Wittgenstein called the unspeakable, the transcendental presence of the other, which can be absectioned in various ways to yield systems of knowledge, which can be brought back into ordinary social space for the good of the community. In the context of 90% of human culture, the shaman has been the agent of evolution, because the shaman learns the techniques to go between ordinary reality and the domain of the ideas, this higher dimensional continuum that is somehow parallel to us, available to us, and yet ordinarily occluded by cultural convention. And shamans are people who have been able to decondition themselves from the community's instinctual distrust of mystery and go into this bewildering higher dimension and gain knowledge, recover the jewel lost at the beginning of time, save souls, cure, and commune with the ancestors. It takes a lot of work and quite often a lot of drugs to become a shaman. Anyone can do it. Anyone can step across the threshold between the human and the transhuman, but not everyone survives the encounter. No one survives it completely intact. That's the nature of the experience and its price. Despite the staggering costs to our identity, this is a way to the transhuman, an ancient way which has come down to us in its more modern counterpart, witchcraft. We could, and perhaps should, become a species of shamans, unafraid of the raw possibility of the numinous. It would take courage and practice and whatever guidance we can find along the path. Luckily, we live in an era where much of the knowledge of shamans throughout the world is available to us. We need not enter into the transhuman blindly. We have 100,000 years of experience to guide us. Now, the legends of the ancient Celts tell of another people who passed into transhumanity. The Tuatha Dé Danann, or fairy folk as they're more commonly known, once lived upon the earth, but as humankind evolved and migrated to their lands, these people fled into the hills, somehow translating their substance into something else, creating a private universe where they were unspeakably powerful, utterly content, and endlessly happy. The human encounters with the fairy folks, and there are many of them, bear all the markings of a shamanic encounter with the numinous. Time and space are distorted, reason is confounded, and unless a person is very careful, he'll never find his way back to his companions. I wonder if the Tuatha Dé Danann exist, or if they're an ancient intimation of our future, or whether they'll greet us once we join them. But enough of the old science, the way of the dark. Let's fast forward 100,000 years to 1973 and consider a 10-year-old Mark Pesce reading Michael Crichton's recently published novel, The Terminal Man. This techno-thriller relates the story of Harry Benson, a man with temporal lobe epilepsy, leading to seizures of thought in which he becomes uncontrollably violent. The solution to the problem? Insert electrodes into Benson's cerebral cortex, capable of delivering a counter-stimulus to ward off the seizures. Well, the operation is unsuccessful, or rather, it's too successful, because his brain learns how to generate the seizures in order to receive the pleasurable countershock. Now, Crichton's work was based on research done in the 1950s by neurophysiologist James Olds, who discovered that rats with electrodes implanted in their limbic systems, their ancient reptile brains, would sometimes ignore food and water in favor of a continuous stimulation of these electrodes up to 5,000 times an hour. And in the novel, Crichton relates the tale of a man who walks off the street into the neuropsychiatric clinic and asks for experimental and dangerous surgery just so he can experience such a continuum of pleasure. That story and the word for that man, an ELAD, electrical addict, have remained with me ever since. They form a foundation of my thinking. And although Crichton's book was touted as science fiction at the time of its publication, the science of electronic brain stimulation had already been fully explored by a Mexican neuroscientist named Jose Delgado, who used it to modify the violent behavioral traits produced by organic damage to the brain. In 1969, he wrote a popular text called Physical Control of the Mind Toward a Psycho-Civilized Society, and in it he laid out the implications of his work in absolute terms. The possibility of scientific annihilation of personal identity, or even worse, its purposeful control, has sometimes been considered a future threat even more awful than atomic holocaust. Even physicians have expressed doubt about the propriety of physical tampering with the psyche, maintaining that personal identity should be inviolable. that any attempt to modify individual behavior is unethical, and that method and related research which can influence the brain should be banned. The prospect of any degree of physical control of the mind provokes a variety of objections. Theological objections because it affects free will, moral objections because it affects individual responsibility, ethical objections because it may block self-defense mechanisms, philosophical objections because it threatens personal identity. As science seems to be approaching the possibility of controlling many aspects of behavior electronically and chemically, these questions must be answered. Now, Delgado was very nearly hounded out of his field after publishing these words. No one wanted to confront the birth of the deterministic man, the cyborg, whose feelings are synthesized stimulations and who is just a mechanism of a mechanized culture. We moderns consider such thoughts profoundly dehumanizing. And although Delgado's work may seem very chilling, are his efforts qualitatively different from the world of psychotropics that have been presented by Big Pharma as the panaceas of psycho-civilization? Prozac, Paxil, Zoloft, Ativan, Wellbutrin, Xanax, Valium. The list grows ever longer, with each new discovery about the nature of the synaptic gap, the structure of the neuron, and the biological substrate of mind. Eric Davis and many others have written intelligently about the era of designer mind. And we can easily imagine a time when our thoughts and feelings are precisely tuned by our healthcare professionals, the era of better living through neurochemistry. Yet there's an even simpler and likely more effective mechanism to make us all happy, or at least complacent. The work of Dr. Michael Persinger of Laurentian University in Quebec has been widely reported in the media over the last few years because of his discovery of the God module, an area of the brain associated with sensations of divine presence and mystical experience. Dr. Persinger has even perfected an apparatus which externally stimulates this region of the brain using electromagnetic waves in a focused beam. But before his work became widely known, Dr. Persinger authored a paper titled, and it's, I quote, "on the possibility of directly accessing every human brain by electromagnetic induction of fundamental algorithms." Here's what he says in the abstract. Contemporary neuroscience suggests the existence of fundamental algorithms by which all sensory transduction is translated into the intrinsic brain-specific code. Direct stimulation of these codes within the human temporal or limbic cortices by applied electromagnetic patterns may require energy levels that are within the reach of both geomagnetic activity and contemporary communication networks. A process which is coupled to the narrow band of brain temperature could allow all normal human brains to be affected. Given what we already know about the brain and how electromagnetic fields can shape the way we feel, Dr. Persinger believes that a global mechanism could be constructed which would effectively create the same feeling in all of us, everywhere, simultaneously. Well, with chilling and scientifically supportable statements like these, you could well begin to wonder if the oft-expressed paranoid delusion of mind control satellites isn't simply a apprehension of the future, rather than an unrealistic flight from reality. And perhaps we should all begin wearing tinfoil helmets. And now, I must ask the inevitable question. Are we just machines, ready to be programmed into new states of being? I recall my favorite line from another film about mind control, Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange. When a man ceases to choose, he ceases to be a man. This is true as anything that's ever been said about man. But we're not talking about man anymore. We're speaking of transhumanity. The gun is the archetype of violence in our world. It is all of human evil cast into a single object. And the question it asks of each of us is this: can we choose not to pull the trigger, no matter what the situation, even in our own defense? As long as we do not know the answer to that question, we will inevitably fail at the threshold of the transhuman. For our own hatred, the hatred of even just one of us, will consume all of us and the entire earth. The safest course, it would seem, would be to deny ourselves the capacity to act by ridding ourselves of the emotions that would drive us toward the act. So here then are the two possibilities. Both are madness. But then I judge them from a human perspective. Nietzsche noted that the forms of a new culture are always seen as demonic by the culture which precedes it. We're getting into regions beyond good and evil. Any of the rules we know of do not apply. Would that we could travel to the place beyond words, the ineffable, where we could sit in knowing silence, accepting the terror and understanding it. But words are all we have, and they're all I can offer you. We know this: history has failed us, or rather left us with no clear path toward the transhuman. Yet it comes just the same, and no solution lies within easy reach. So now we have to ask ourselves, do we want to straddle the doorway and suffer the blindness of unbearable light? Or should we build mind control satellites, now that this capability is within our grasp, stimulating our brains into a constant gnosis, a simulation of God? Which path to the angels? When we've gone beyond reason and logic and goodwill and accepted the horror of the situation, the terror of the terminus, when we can look at it without flinching, without sorrow, without pity, neither trusting the lie of perpetual rising nor the rumors of apocalyptic demise, without cyborgs or demons, angels or eschaton. But if it is just us, only us together, in a place where words cannot reach, what then is there that divides you from me, I and thou? In my very clearest and highest moments, my ego subdued or inflated beyond all bounds, being much the same thing. In those moments when the universe accepts me into her bosom, or rather, I accept her embrace. When this is that and that this, a condition of utter simplicity, costing not less than everything. Yet I will not be swept up in a false nirvana, nor in mindlessness, nor in hatred, nor in sweet dreams of tomorrow's promise, nor in the darkening gentle of another good night. For now I lay me down to sleep, and dreams come in which I must awaken.
I came here to give you these facts. It is no concern of ours how you run your own planet. But if you threaten to extend your violence, this Earth of yours will be reduced to a burned-out cinder. Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. We shall be waiting for your answer. The decision rests with you.